So thank you for having me. It's getting late in the afternoon, so cybersecurity should be a really good topic to put everybody to sleep. So we'll try and make it a little entertaining. You know, one of the interesting aspects of cybersecurity is we talk a lot about security, but nobody actually really cares. Like if you get the little button on the bottom, like, you know, you're trying to get Wi-Fi at the airport and it comes up and says, your certificates are all wrong. You're like, yes, just so you can get your Wi-Fi working, right? And so the challenge is we need to make security invisible. You shouldn't think of security in the context of like, it's gotta be annoying. So what's a great example of security that's done really well? A doorman in an apartment building. If you go get a doorman in an apartment building in New York and you know, have 50 stories of apartments, the value of those apartments goes up because you feel safe that there's somebody watching what's going on, and you know, you get to know the doorman gets to know you. And the result is when you go into your house, you'll lock your door, you might have 1 or 2 locks on your door. If we take the doorman away and what you live is in the projects where anybody can come in and out of the building anytime, and you have no idea the people that are in the building, all of a sudden you feel very unsafe and you'll end up with like bars on their door and chairs stuffed underneath the doorknob. So it's an interesting aspect as to how you make security part of user interface. And I think that's one of the really interesting challenges, is to understand in every startup project we do, the first thing we do is we need a great user interface. And the second thing we do is, please type in your username and password. Please use a password that's at least 16 characters long, has 3 uppercase letters, 2 lowercase letters, a symbol, and don't use the star. Like, by the time you're done, you can't remember it. I should have modified my PowerPoint because we had a great experience here when we got here. They'd forgotten the PIN number to the suitcase that had all the collateral in it. So they spent the better part of an hour this morning picking the lock in the suitcase, which is really quite brilliantly funny. So let's talk about decentralized cybersecurity. So it's cool. We have a blockchain, and the blockchain is spread around the entire planet, and so we are outside the controls of the existing security models that we all have. So decentralized cybersecurity is a whole new topic. We really don't have any tools for that today. We have this blockchain. It's fantastic. It's trustless. What does trustless mean? Trustless means there's no administrator. There's just a bunch of nodes. A bunch of guys set up a bunch of blockchain nodes. They run around the world. How many are there? Don't know. Well, we can count them. We can ask the network how many there are. But fundamentally, can you add another one in 5 minutes? Sure. Can 3 of them go away in the next 5 minutes? Also sure. Does it change the network? No. So there's no admin. In the same way, kind of like with DNS around the network, there's no admin. And so that's what makes it trustless. We're not trusting somebody to run the chain. We're trusting everybody to run the chain. And some of those nodes may or may not have, holes drilled in them. It's an interesting challenge if, different people run different nodes. How do you know that they're all on our side? Are they trying to alter the chain in some way? And so the blockchain consensus mechanism provides that assurance that the nodes are running properly and that the data is being recorded, and we have consensus that the probability the data on the chain is correct is very high. So it's an immutable ledger. We know the data hasn't changed. We know you wrote it at 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, and it's still the same when you come look tomorrow, the next day, the day after. The challenge is we don't really know whether the data on the chain was intended. So this is one of the great problems of blockchain. If I steal your private key, I'm you. So you've heard a bunch of presentations today about things like identity. Blockchain's really bad at identity. It's really great at attributes. It'll store the date of birth of your child and their footprints and all the kind of stuff that was part of a birth certificate. The question is, if I steal your private key, then I can assert that I'm responsible for that. And so that's an interesting challenge, is if I put all my attributes on a blockchain, how do I know when I go to government and say, here's my passport, trust me that you know who I am so I can participate in this ICO, they won't accept your credentials. Not because the blockchain is going to lie about your passport, but because you don't have an adequate level of protection around the private key to assert the authentication to release the use of that attribute. And if you doubt that, I come from the trusted computing space. We've been shipping hardware for many, many, many years. And we still don't have all this stuff in our daily use, primarily because governments have said, well, it's not certified enough, we can't really use it, you should use your Windows environment with a password to do e-commerce. I'll use a fun example. We're here in Europe, so I can use this example. How many people in Europe have been using one of these little chip cards for a few years, right? Everybody. Well, so in 2006 and 7, we became an OEM supplier to Dell, and we were part of helping them do biometrics and trusted platform modules and NFC capabilities on the laptop. We wrote all the driver software for that. And we supplied the infrastructure for a smart card reader because the US Defense Department was using ID cards with chip cards on them. And so they were putting smart card slots as standard into all the Dell corporate laptops. So we thought in our brilliance, we will come with our software that enables the smart card reader to Europe. We will plug your card in so you can shop online. This would be great. You have chip cards. Everybody has a chip card in Europe. We should be able to stuff that chip card right in the side of your laptop, and you can shop. So you use that, right, every day when you shop online. You stuff your chip card in the machine, and you do your transaction. No, you use the American lunatic security scheme, where you type the number in that's on the front of the card, and then for security, you turn it over. Because there's a 3-digit code on the back of the card. That makes it so much safer. Except American Express, they don't like that. They write the code on the front of the card. So this is nuts. We shipped 100 million slots. I'll come back to that story in a little bit and explain why. Because there's an interesting why in that. And it comes to this concept of, was the transaction intended? So what do we have on a blockchain today? We have keys and instructions. That's what you're doing. Inside your device, you have keys in a wallet. You sign an instruction. It's not authentication. Don't think authentication is enough anymore in cybersecurity. It's not. You can't do a blockchain transaction with just authentication. You need to send a secure instruction, which is, please send this much Bitcoin to that account. Because if you just authenticate and you don't send a properly formed instruction, then I can hack your instruction, say, send all the Bitcoin to my account. That would be excellent. So if I just write a piece of software runs in everybody's phone, tablet, laptop, whatever, that sends all the Bitcoin to my account, you approve it, it shows on the screen correctly, just remember your machine's lying to you. You have no assurance that the device in which you do the transaction is actually yours, right? It might be run by the Russians or the 400-pound guy in his basement in Detroit. Depends on who you're deciding. I guess now we can pick on the North Koreans. It's becoming unpopular to pick on the North Koreans to hack everything. So we're going to have to find a new person who's hacking everything. The North Koreans were good, though. They were stealing everybody's Bitcoin to build rockets. It was fantastic. Like, don't be surprised. Like, they were actively hacking every single ICO because they were using it to build rockets. So they're depressed that these ICO, anyway. So what can we do? Well, maybe we could add to the chain more evidence than just the transaction hash. Maybe we can add an attestation hash that tells us about the health and integrity of the thing that protected the key. So it's not just a single, signature that says, okay, on chain, when I look at it, I can prove the transaction has been done. So if you take your Ether scan, you look at a transaction, you can see all the details, you can scan forward and back. It's always entertaining to see what other, once you send money to somebody, you can then see where else they got money from. It's playing around with Ether scan is just hysterically good fun. It'd be even better if we had identity attached to all this, you see where everybody spent money to them. So if we can add attestation to that, then we can prove that this device in this condition with these measured controls wrote that transaction. And so we start to have the basic foundations of a cybersecurity control. We can have rules attached to keys, and those rules have to be satisfied or the key won't be allowed to be used. So, let me go back one. So rules. Rules are fun. Like, what kind of rules could there be? You're not allowed to spend Bitcoin after 11:30 at night unless your mom says it's okay. That could be a rule, right? So you could have a wallet that says, you can spend all the Bitcoin you want, but after 11:30, mom has to consent. So it sends a message from your trust agent in your device off to mom's devices. Oh my God, he's out and he needs money. And will you release him to spend Bitcoin after 11:30 at night? Mom pushes OK, now you can spend your money. Some people might not like that rule. Like, we could put rules on using Twitter accounts. That might be good, especially in today's current political context. You know, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to tweet before 5:30 in the morning. So the concept of having a reference condition where the device is in the right structure and is in the right condition, or I won't let you use your keys. So let me use a more real-world example. We have a relationship with Telefonica, and they have this data center that monitors all your activity on the dark web. It's fantastic. We just met with their supplier for this the other day. They have 10 billion records of usernames and passwords on the dark web. 10 billion. There aren't 10 billion people on the internet. But they got 10 billion usernames and passwords. Like, that's really interesting. That means you have all of mine. What was also fascinating to learn was not only do they have all of our usernames and passwords, but they've actually figured out how to look at the hashes of passwords so they can compare backwards up into the accounts that you're the same person using the same password, which is interesting. So if you're hacking stuff, they said most hackers use the same password, they just change the username, which I just find funny because you'd think they'd know. But you know, they're humans too. It's like remembering a different password for every different hacker account you have would get really annoying. So just use the same password for everything. Then, of course, they can reverse look up all the accounts you have that have the same password. Brilliant. But contacting the network and saying, for example, before I release your two-factor authenticator, is the username and password for this account on the dark web? Because it's a second-factor authenticator. So if I start to use my second-factor authenticator and key it into a browser, and you've already stolen my first factor, which is my username and password, probably a good probability I might be a target. And so having a device, for example, that could check and see whether or not for a high-value account, like access to your $10 million of ICO funds you've already converted into cash at Bank of America, where you get an SMS-based two-factor, wouldn't you like to actually know whether the username and password for that account's already on the dark web? Because that would be a cool thing to know. So building this infrastructure of what those kinds of services look like and enabling the process to have them token enabled. So I can have at different levels for different keys, different rules, and pay for some of those rules because they can be provided by third parties. Like, am I still an employee? Am I in the right geolocation? Maybe I can only use my Bitcoin wallet if I'm at home. Right? So if I lose it and I'm traveling, it doesn't really matter because the thing is completely ineffective unless it's within my geolocation at home. Why do we want any of these things? So these are like simple controls. We as users can apply to rules. We can make our own rules for our own keys. Because fundamentally, this is about increasing the value of the data on the chain. So if you're looking at a project and you say, I have this great project, whatever it's doing on blockchain, if we add better cybersecurity controls to the blockchain, then what effectively we've done is increase the value and quality of the data on the chain. And so we think that every project benefits from a slightly higher level of assurance and proof that the keys that are used are still under control and that they haven't been compromised. There are a lot of different projects that are out there in the marketplace that would benefit from trusted execution. I like to use a simple example because it's sort of easy to keep in your head. Imagine if we were to put like the number of rounds available in ammunition for the US Army on a blockchain. Cool app. There are like 50 people who make bullets. There's like 10,000 people who pull the bullets out of inventory and go shoot them at things, right? And so a blockchain should do a great job of a decentralized inventory of how many bullets we have, till the Russians steal one key. At which point they can just sit in the basement, roll dice, and decide how many 100,000 they either add or subtract from the chain each day. So then how many bullets do you have? I don't know. But I thought blockchain was supposed to give me an immutable record. Well, it does, but I don't have control of all the keys. Which key did the Russians steal? Don't know. Because it looks just normally like activity in the chain like every other day. So when I count the number of bullets in inventory, it turns out we're off by 43 million bullets. Where'd they go? Don't know. So, we need an accounting system to watch all the keys that were attached to the blockchain. So when you start thinking about like supply chain integrity, immutable databases, et cetera, how do you know I didn't borrow a key? These are the tools to begin to put that value back into the chain. So I can say, oh, these are all keys that are under our control. Let's go inventory them. Where do we have a weakness? And if we find a weakness attached to one key, what are all the transactions that were associated with that? So what's trusted execution? 20 years ago, an industry standard was developed within the PC architecture first and then within the mobile architecture. It's kind of gone back and forth between the two. This stems from early work in smart cards, so it's probably even older than that, giving away how old I've been doing this. And these are industry standards that have been developed over the years by Global Platform, GSMA, Trusted Computing Group. They're in 1.9 billion PCs. Emphasis on the word billion PCs. Every single PC out there has a common hardware security chip on the motherboard of the PC, has since 2008. We're now at like 2.5 billion mobile phones with a common trust architecture, and Intel started shipping their third generation technology they call SGX, which is a trusted execution environment PCs. It's on about 500 million to more PCs now. It's on 500 million about a year ago, so it's probably double that now. Believe it or not, PCs had trusted display in them, actually still do on many. Unlike over 1 billion PCs have shipped with the secure display, like you trust your Trezor to put on the screen what you're doing. You could do that within a PC architecture today, but nobody uses it. So we as a company have built a set of tools to give consumers and developers access to use these technologies and embedded with them within the device. Things like secure display, isolated protection of keys, secure PIN entry, so I know that when I type a PIN number in, it actually came from a human, it wasn't supplied by software on the device. Strong encryption and decryption, probably slightly stronger than necessarily we all really want to deploy worldwide. And integration of the biometrics. So a really interesting challenge about how we put these parts together. We're actually beginning to explore with one of our partners the use of not only the trusted execution environment that's in the device itself, but also including security within the app infrastructure within a smart card. We hope that within the next year, we'll be able to show you a Bitcoin wallet that has half the keys in a SIM chip, half the keys in a TEE environment. So you'll have dual, isolated, independent roots of trust. So you're not trusting a single manufacturer to protect our value. You're actually trusting two manufacturers in the supply chain. And the architecture it's being built on could ultimately support more than two. And so this concept of a multi-device model for security, assuring our transactions for our higher quality transactions in the network, we think is a really valuable component to the system. So I want to come back to my earlier comment about payments. So does anybody know how an e-commerce transaction works? We do them all every day. We as consumers do this every day. You have the advantage in Europe that you're a little bit ahead of us in the US. You've been doing this for like 25 years. We've only been doing it for like 15 years. We're still not very good at it. And I'll point out some of the weaknesses that we have. But when we go out and buy a cappuccino at the store, in this country, you don't hand them your credit card and they take it in the little back room, make a copy of it, and then charge you by swiping it in the machine. That's what we do in the US. We don't have these like mobile portable terminals that come to your table because that would be annoying to carry around in the restaurant. So the first piece is trusted display. Why do they bring a terminal to your table? So that you can see on that little screen the amount you're going to be charged. Not the amount written on the bill, the amount they typed into the machine. So you can visually confirm what you're going to sign. That's why it's in the Ingenico payment terminal. Then you get to type a PIN number in. You have a chip card, you plug it in the device, they ask you for your PIN number, you type it in. Again, we're from the US, we decided to abandon PINs. We use chip and signature. Last night, I was at dinner here in Amsterdam. I think it's the first time in the last 2 months somebody asked to check my signature with another device. Like, they took my card and looked at the signature and looked at what I signed. You can sign anything. And just borrow somebody's credit card if they're US, because you can really sign pretty much anything. Nobody checks. But this is user consent. This is you consenting to the transaction on a terminal that this is actually what you intended to spend. So now you've visually confirmed what you're going to sign. You've supplied a PIN number to release the use of the private key. You've consented to that transaction. And so now you have that chip and a chip card that you introduced into the terminal. So in the terminal, you now have supplied your chip card. It has the private key on it. it allows signing of the transaction. Oh, this is just like a Trezor, right? Secure display, secure PIN entry, isolated protection of the private key, and secure formation of an instruction. One of the things that's going to be a byproduct of blockchain is we're going to teach the world how to do secure e-commerce. Your e-commerce experience is going to change. It's going to finally become safe. So to come back to the story of Dell, so we have these smart card slots on the side of the machine. Now it's important to remember that the US Defense Department will supply GPS coordinates for smart bombs by typing them into their terminal and signing them with their smart card. But when we brought these same terminal devices to Europe and said, well, mom should be given one of these laptops so that it'd be more convenient to shop online, just plug your card in, it'll download all your data, it'll be fantastic, it'll be safe. You're like, oh my God, you can't use that. You can't use that because the PC doesn't have a secure PIN pad. If you type your password or your PIN number into your keyboard, could a virus on your keyboard steal the PIN number? Yes, because the PC doesn't have secure PIN entry. We can't let you sign the transaction because the screen's going to lie to you. Is there any trusted display on the screen? How do we know that the transaction shown on the screen is what the machine sends? We don't know that. You don't have secure display. So in EMV, EuroPay, MasterCard, and Visa's agreement for secure transactions, they're like, we won't let you spend $2 online. Now, again, we can code in the GPS coordinates for smart bombs in digital identity with these digital identity smart cards, but digital identity smart cards plugged into PC don't need to be safe. This is true world around because the US government, when they adopted smart cards for identity the first time, forgot the other two legs of security or ignored them. And so for payments, we require these. That's why your bricks and mortar shopping today is safe. Our e-commerce and Bitcoin's completely unsafe because we're like typing into computers, my Ether wallet, we're typing in the amount into a computer screen that's run by somebody else. And it's relatively easy to write a virus that changes the address, changes this, especially if you're doing an ICO where people know a specific transaction and they're trying to redirect you to something else. It's quite fantastic how broken it is. But we're missing a piece. And the piece is that we want assurance that those other three pieces are working correctly. And so what those other three pieces provide, we can measure that the trusted display is working, that the trusted input is operational, that your key is protected, the formation of the instruction. So we can bind that attestation verification into the chain so that now on chain we have the evidence that this device in this condition with these controls wrote this transaction. So what's that look like? A little bit complicated picture, but fundamentally you have a trust device. It can go out to any external attribute server and say, hey, check some stuff for me. Come back with a hash, let me incorporate that into a blockchain transaction and record that transaction on the network, not only with its transaction identity, but also its attestation identity. We actually demonstrated this transaction. If you go onto our website, you can see a video from 2016. It's not the most brilliant piece of video work, but it shows the first transaction ever done that had full attestation. It's probably the most secure e-commerce transaction ever executed. It was done on a blockchain. We modified the wallet infrastructure in a core Bitcoin protocol with a couple of additional opcodes to support this test of does a reference health measurement equal a real-time health measurement where the transaction doesn't advance. And so we could record on a regular chain. And so we'll continue to push this forward because the goal is to improve the forensic claims. The real fundamental question in this whole space is, great, we've done all this cool stuff, what can you prove? You've put data on a chain. Now when you're done with the project and you want to create some evidence, what is it that you can prove? You want to prove that I already have a passport that's been verified by a third party. Can I use it for a second ICO? Like, really? Do I have to go get it notarized by the lawyers again? Should I just take my passport down, get it notarized like 75 times, and then I can have copies I can scan and send you with a wet ink signature, like that's safe, on a picture I took of my passport that says some lawyer somewhere that nobody knows in scribbly language verified my credentials. That's what we have today. But that's what Cayman Islands requires if you want to participate in a KYC transaction, a certified notarized passport. We could do this on chain. We have to be able to prove that we have all those pieces in place and that we were the one releasing the transaction, and I'm not borrowing his passport to do an ICO with a different set of keys and tokens. And so it's an interesting question to ask on any project. As you look at your project, step back and say, what really can I prove? What data have I really recorded? If I had to go to court and prove it, well, if I just say that, my next door neighbor borrowed my private keys, then what can I prove? How well were they protected? Do I know how well they were protected? So we think part of this, and I'll spend just a minute talking about tokens. We think tokens are a really important piece of the business because what tokens represent is a new economic model for services and software on the internet. We're going to move away from a purely ad-supported model. Why? Because in IoT, the things aren't going to watch ads. My refrigerator's not going to watch ads. It's going to have to pay for service. And so how are we going to make that work? We have to have a microtransaction model. We need a mechanism to store the value on devices, and we need to put a mechanism that will put policy around that. So keys with rules, like you can only use my IOTA key to talk to these 4 other things. You can't take it and spend it somewhere else. And so now my device can be assured that only I can send my tokens to these other devices or these other networks. And so if we as owners of the platform can make rules, then we think machines with money or an allowance, you really want your robots to have an allowance. You don't want it going, hey, Dad, can you get your Trezor out? Because I need to talk to the dishwasher. Like, we don't want that transaction. We want our refrigerator to automatically talk to the dishwasher and discuss who's going to use the power before it overdoes the solar power in the house and requires grid power to operate, right? There's all sorts of things that are possible when we have everything talking to each other, and we're going to tokenize it, but we need a safe mechanism to make sure that the devices can store and spend the money according to our rules and controls. And so we think Rivets is a very important token to enable that process. We're here to provide the keys and the rules and the process to do that. And so really addressing one of the great challenges of how do we create automatic money with crypto, which is not as easy as it appears on the surface. So getting close to the end of this, the challenge is a known user with a known device and a known condition providing an assured instruction. Or I could say it another way, only known devices connected to sensitive networks and data. Let's stop having known users with unknown compute, which is what we do today. We have a username and password and we log into a public terminal. We'd be much happier if our stupid phone would be registered with all the services to which we belong. So my phone, my tablet, my PC, my spouse's phone, my kids' phones, those collection of devices were my identity, and they belonged to all the services I have, and I don't have any stupid passwords. We have this. It's called your mobile phone. When you push the send button, it's two-factor authentication. It doesn't ask you for a PIN number. It doesn't ask you to wave your phone around, and big data and AI will decide if you're in the proper condition to complete a phone call. No, you push the send button. It works great. Some of us are old enough to remember there was no send button. You just dialed a number and got connected. Yeah, a stupid send button. But I shouldn't have to dial the number and take a selfie. That's a crazy idea. So why should I have to log into my PC, it takes a selfie of me? Why can't it just remember like my phone does? We know how to do this. We know how to build it better. So remember that security is user interface. It's user experience. If we make it safer and simpler, we can provide an easier and more valuable experience on the network. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Are there any questions here in the room? Yeah.
Hi. What's wrong with a paper wallet?
There's nothing wrong with a paper wallet. Paper wallets are great. How did you write it? So you created a key pair on your device. What type of device? PC, a phone, a tablet. You write down your 12 words. I stole them when you wrote them down. Because what I wrote is a virus that's looking for 12 stupid words. Right? So that's a relatively easy virus to write that says when 12 random words are associated next to each other, send them to me. Okay? So wouldn't you prefer if when we create your wallet and you go to back it up because you want to do that, and you want a paper wallet, which is great, maybe what we should do is send half the words to your screen and the other half of the words to your other device's screen. Let's use a secure channel between two trusted execution environments to deliver that message so I don't have to trust the operating system. It never left the secure container. The words were calculated in your secure container and displayed on two screens. So now when you write down your words, they could be two screens this far from each other. But I'm trusting the Windows operating system on your laptop and the Android operating system on your phone, and the hacker's got to be aware that both of those devices are somehow involved. And so we think that's a better model. Even better, why don't we shard your 12 words, let's send some of them to mom, and so in order to recover your machine, you got to call your mother. This will improve the relationship with your mother. And by the way, it assures that when you're chatting with mom and going, Mom, you got to push this button and send me those shards of keys because I got to recover my Bitcoin wallet, that it's very hard to hack mom. Like if you call up and say, "Hi, I'm Bob. I would like to have your key." She's going to recognize if Bob is not her son, right? So it's not like, I don't know. We get a lot of phone calls these days from people who are like, "Hi, I'm Bob," right?
Thank you.
Second question, yeah, here at the left side.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you. Very, very well done. So with my ledger and my keep key in a safe upstairs with a key that I have hidden, and then I have to go back to my YubiKey and my fingerprint, I still don't trust my 10-year-old to play games on my computer because I don't know if he's going to be doing something that I don't want. Is there a point at which this becomes foolproof, or is this just a continual evolution of stages in which we have to stay ahead of a curve?
So I would tell you we know how to do this. If you take the Joint Strike Fighter, it has a common compute architecture in it, and it turns out they run things called isolation kernels inside the operating systems of those chipsets, so that when the GPS system reboots, it doesn't stall your ability to like drive the plane. Because that would really annoy you. Like if you got 17 screens in your jet fighter and you push the button and something goes, "I'm sorry, we're rebooting." You really would like to still be able to steer. And so we have the technologies to do this. The world knows how to build this stuff. We just have to do it right. And it starts from the hardware. We have to start with known devices. Today, the problem is that in that PC, as an example, that your children are playing games on, we don't, for example, test the BIOS. So we don't know if the game came in, bought a Stuxnet type payload that changed the BIOS in that machine that's now watching the keyboard looking for 12 words. That's the problem. And so, yeah, we can work on, how do I have an isolated computer running in a Linux box somewhere else? Or maybe I could give you a 10-year-old technology of a secure encrypted hard drive with dual isolated partitions and an OR statement with passwords that I carried. My old company built software for them in 2009. So when I typed in this password, my machine was this machine. When I typed in that password, my machine was a different machine. I had an OR statement in hardware enforced by the drive controller's encryption engine, and you either were A or B. The two machines never existed in the same time-space continuum. Now that would be cool, because then I could have the same piece of hardware, boot it in this way. You can run anything you want, and I guarantee you can't infect the other partition. It's a poor man's isolation in a box. Those hard drives have shipped 1 billion copies in PCs today. Maybe we should build the software to turn it on in the blockchain space so we could have 2 machines in one. So I don't have to have my Linux box in the corner. I can carry it around with me. You can decide whether you really want to carry it around with you, because that has its own issues. But yeah, I think we can make this safe. I think we have to make this safe. This isn't going to grow if we don't make it, my friend of mine the other day was using the term grandma simple, which I think is a great way to think about it, right? How do we make this stuff really easy? And so we're focused on trying to bring world-class security and then give it to the children so that the children can properly operate this. We've been thinking that in security business, we got to sell it to like the Defense Department first. Defense Department doesn't know how to buy this stuff. We need to give it to the kids. Now, who was the largest deployed information sharing application in the world with an attempt at good security? It was Snapchat. So you think Snapchat's a DRM company who's doing digital rights management for information assurance and sharing, so the message goes away after 30 seconds, so if you take a naked picture of your butt, it goes away? Well, note to self, The keys weren't properly protected, so they don't really go away after 30 seconds. The kids were all a little surprised to learn that. And Snapchat got sued by the FTC to no longer say that the messages go away after 30 seconds because they were lying. But fundamentally, we wanted that kind of information sharing. So yes, I do believe it's actually possible. I think we can do this, but we need to move away from this concept of terminal computers that you type passwords in, like an iPhone with an app, right? It doesn't know who the hell you are. You have to type your password in. Then it knows who you are. It's like, what's with that? Like, didn't they get the memo that they're on mobile? Mobile's where you have device identity that logs you in, so why can't I register my phone? Like, a BlackBerry did that, great. You like register with BlackBerry Messenger? Did you have a password to the BlackBerry Messenger? No. So you can't give it up. You enrolled your phone. It was key-based. And so with blockchain, I think we can bring that back.
So just a quick follow-up to that. With the security measures that you personally use, do you feel secure, or do you still wake up at night screaming sometimes?
I have to say, the only time I've ever really actually been in a panic was during the context of our ICO. I've been doing cybersecurity my whole life, and it was embarrassing to me after my whole life in cybersecurity that I can't send you a code. Here's 32 characters, put $1 million on it. Really? Are you sure? So like in this case, the reason I had a panic was because I'd called up the guys who were helping us run our sale. In this case, it was Token Market. And we had a buyer who wanted to do a specific transaction. And so we created an additional wallet address. And I really wanted to verify it 4 times, and I only managed to verify it 3 before we were able to send it out. And I was just sitting there, and it was just annoying me because I knew the money had been sent, right? I saw the ETH, I could see it deposited on the account. What I didn't know, was whether I actually had control of that account. And I have to say that's one of the only times in my life ever that I've had as close as you could come to saying a panic attack. And so we need to fix that. Like, how can I send you a piece of information you know came from me? It's actually incredibly hard to do. If you look at an ICO today, just a quick note, this is an important thing. Anybody who's participating in an ICO, anybody who's doing an ICO, if you don't know what an extended validation SSL is, put your hands down. Stop touching the machine. An extended validation SSL is when the little green bar at the top is green. The difference between an extended validation SSL and a regular SSL is one of them checks that it actually came from the company. The other one, any idiot with $300 can get. And so when you see a web address that has a token address on it and has green bar, you can assure that somebody went through KYC, that the actual entity that is named in the extended validation cert is the one who controls the security of that page. It is not perfect, but it is the best tool we have. It's why your bank has a green bar SSL. They cost $1,000. If your ICO is not willing to invest $1,000 in your security, then they're not a project you should fund. Period. It's not complicated. It's the only tool we have. That's embarrassing. I'm sorry for that. We've shipped better securities and technologies to do this. We shipped, in my case, we delivered 160 million copies of software and PC platforms that would have done a better job in that, and nobody turned it on. And so the tools have been there. We could have done a better job for you. We didn't. Leverage your green bar SSL. Force your projects to provide you at least basic security. Anyway, thank you.
We have to go to the next presentation. Thank you, Stephen, for an exciting presentation.